I wasn't trying to listen. I was just walking past the kitchen on my way to refill my tea when I heard my daughter's voice. Paige was pacing barefoot across the tile, her hand slicing the air the way she always did when she was complaining. She didn't lower her voice. She didn't notice me. "Her room stinks," she said into the phone. "It's like nursing home air, heavy like old fabric and something medical. I've sprayed the whole bottom floor, but it clings to everything." She laughed, a short, clipped sound I didn't recognize. My hand shook around the chipped mug I carried tea, sloshing dangerously close to the rim. I stood just outside the doorway, not hidden, not sneaking, just there. My heart didn't race. It slowed. I backed up quietly and returned to the room they called the guest room, the room that had become mine. I closed the door softly, not to hide, but to protect something in me that had been peeled open too fast. The tea had cooled. I set it on the dresser where I kept my folded nightgown's vitamins and a framed picture of Paige at 7 years old, grinning with no front teeth. That face had once begged me for lullabies, cried when I left for my night shift, whispered secrets with paint-stained fingers. Now she passed me in the hallway without touching my arm. She thanked me for folding laundry as though I were a polite neighbor, not her mother. 3 months ago, I turned 77. 2 weeks later, I had a mild stroke. Nothing dramatic, but enough to make mornings uncertain. Paige had called immediately. "You shouldn't be alone, Mom. You'll stay with us just until things settle." I had once been a woman who didn't need permission to exist. For 42 years, I worked nights as a nurse at Memorial Hospital, bringing babies into the world, holding hands of those leaving it. People trusted me with their lives, their last words, their first breaths. Now I needed permission to adjust the thermostat. I picked up the mug again, ran my thumb over the crack widening along the rim, another damaged thing trying to remain useful. Outside the window, the roses I planted last spring were brittle, fading under too much sun. Still there, still trying. Just like me. I thought about the pink linen dress I had bought for myself 5 years ago, a retirement gift with delicate pleats and mother-of-pearl buttons. I had imagined Sunday brunches in sunlit cafes, laughter with friends. I never wore it once. The brunches never happened. The friends either passed away or moved away. And I had moved into Paige's guest room with a suitcase and a promise that it was temporary. I sold my condo, a quiet street, south-facing windows, the kind of place I imagined aging into. My savings helped with the down payment on this house. Paige's name went on the mortgage, but my money built the foundation. At first it felt shared. I baked muffins. I watched Tyler and Zoe when Paige had meetings. I paid the water bill without being asked. But slowly, my boxes were moved to the garage, my chair removed from the living room, my name erased from the Wi-Fi password note. I became the folded towels, the hot tea, the extra hand for carpool. "Mom, can you get the kids today?" Paige would say halfway out the door in her tailored suit, not waiting for an answer. Mason, her husband, worked in finance. He wasn't unkind, just absent, his eyes always on a screen. The children had changed too. Tyler, 15, now used to curl into my lap for stories, his small hand patting my cheek, as I did different voices. Now he mumbled, "Hey, Grandma," without looking up from his phone. Zoe, 12, once asked me to braid her hair before school. Now she closed her door when I passed. Last week I heard her tell a friend, "I can't have anyone over. My grandma's staying with us." It's complicated. It wasn't complicated when I paid for summer camp or stayed up all night helping with science projects. But children learn what they see, and what they saw was their mother stepping around me like a piece of furniture she might donate someday. I used to keep tomatoes in blue ceramic pots by the kitchen window. A little morning ritual. Paige walked by one afternoon before her book club and said, "Mom, do you mind moving these? They don't go with the aesthetic." I nodded and carried them carefully behind the shed where no one but raccoons would see them. The soil was poor there. The tomatoes never sweetened. Still, I tended them daily, pruned, watered, whispered to them when no one was listening. The muffins and scones I baked went uneaten. "We're cutting carbs," Paige said, glancing at a plate of blueberry scones without lifting her eyes from her phone. The expensive candle outside my door smelled like bleach and apology. "Don't take it personally," she said. But I did. I began showering twice a day, scrubbing with lavender soap until my skin was raw, washing my nightgowns daily so their scent wouldn't contaminate the dryer. I wanted to stay useful, clean, unobtrusive. But even excuses can't warm cold stares. One night, unable to sleep, I went to the kitchen for tea and found Tyler making a sandwich. He startled, then smiled. "Hey, Grandma. Want one?" I shook my head. "Just tea." He spread peanut butter in neat strokes and then said suddenly, "I heard Mom talking to Dad. She wants to put you in a home. Said it would be better for everyone." The kettle began to scream. I turned it off with hands that didn't feel like my own. "I see," I said. He looked fierce, suddenly older. I told her it was messed up. He hugged me briefly before retreating upstairs with his sandwich. I sat in the dark tea, forgotten, thinking of all the lives I had cared for, all the homes I had made, and how easily we become inconvenient when no longer useful. On my 77th birthday, no one remembered until dessert. We were eating store-bought cheesecake, not my favorite, when Paige suddenly gasped. "Oh my God, Mom, it's your birthday!" Mason blinked up from his phone, muttered a flat, "Happy birthday, Loretta." Tyler mumbled something similar. Only Zoe jumped up, wrapped her thin arms around me, and whispered, "I'm sorry, Grandma. I would have made you a card." I smiled and told her it was just a day. Later, alone in my room, I pulled out the pink linen dress still hanging in its garment bag. I laid it across the bed and touched the fabric, remembering James twirling me in our kitchen long ago, calling me beautiful. I believed him then. Now I was just an old woman in a borrowed room touching a dress she'd never worn. But that night, something shifted. I slipped it on just to see. The fabric settled cool against my skin. My body had changed, but it still looked lovely. I stood before the mirror and for the first time in months saw myself as more than Paige's mother or Tyler and Zoe's grandmother. I was Loretta Dean. I had worked decades as a nurse, saved lives, raised a daughter, loved a good man, and survived loss. I was not just an obligation. A spark inside flickered back to life. I sat down and wrote a list of things I still owned, things no one could take unless I allowed it my name, my memories, my choices. When I finished, I hung the dress where I could see it every day, a reminder. The next morning, Paige rushed in late for work. "Mom, can you pick up the dry cleaning? Zoe has a dentist appointment at 4:00 p.m. I looked at her and said quietly, "No, I have plans today." She froze, one earring half fastened. "Plans? What plans?" I sipped my tea. "Just plans." She blinked, torn between irritation and confusion, before rushing out the door. It was only a small victory, but it felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. That afternoon, I wore the pink dress to lunch at a small French bistro downtown. I ordered wine croque monsieur and sat by the window watching the world. The waiter called me Madame. A woman at the next table complimented my dress. For 2 hours, I was simply a woman enjoying her lunch. When I returned, Paige was in the kitchen with her laptop. She looked startled. "Where have you been? I called you." "I went to lunch. With myself," I said and smiled. That night, I wrote another word on my list, courage, because I knew I would need it for what came next. The following week, I called a taxi and visited my old lawyer, Raymond Teague. His office hadn't changed in 30 years. He rose when I entered. "Loretta Dean, it's been too long." I explained why I had come. I needed to know exactly where I stood with the house. He nodded unsurprised and pulled out the file. Your daughter never filed the deed transfer. You still own the house outright. Every page is in your name. Relief washed through me, followed by guilt. Raymond leaned forward. May I ask why you're asking now? I told him about the candle outside my door, about overhearing Paige discuss putting me in a home, about the folder I suspected existed in her office. He frowned. Legally, you can enter any room in your house. But Loretta, are you sure you want to know I need to know? I said firmly. To make the right decision. For the next hour, we discussed my options selling the house, placing it in a trust, protecting my autonomy. By the time I left, I had a clearer path forward. That afternoon, while the house was empty, I went into Paige's office. I wasn't sneaking. It was still my house. But my heart pounded as I opened the desk drawer. I found the folder quickly. Burgundy thick, labeled in Paige's neat handwriting, estate planning. Inside were brochures for assisted living facilities annotated with notes like mid-tier care ask about Medicaid conversion. There was a copy of my will with calculations in the margins about property value savings insurance. My life reduced to numbers in her handwriting. There was even a power of attorney form partially filled out awaiting my signature. I sat there for a long time, emptied out. Then I copied everything, placed it in a manila folder I labeled, When They Forget I'm Still Alive, and slid it under my bed. That evening, I boiled water for tea, sat by the window, and watched the sun slip across the roof of the house that still legally belonged to me. I realized then that maybe it wasn't about fitting back in. Maybe it was about learning how to leave the right way this time. The following week, I received a visit I hadn't expected. Elaine Foster, my old colleague from Memorial, showed up at the door with a bag of tomatoes and a pot of basil. We had worked night shifts together for decades, raised families in parallel lives, and I had been at her side when she earned her doctorate in geriatric care. We hadn't spoken in nearly a year, but the hug she gave me smelled of jasmine and felt like home. You're a hard woman to reach these days, she said with a smile. Paige came home mid-visit, her tone polite but stiff as she met Elaine. I could see her discomfort at my having a life beyond her control. After Elaine left, she glanced at the tomatoes and basil. Where will you put them? The kitchen sill is full with my herbs. The herbs she never touched, already wilting. I simply said, Don't worry, I'll find a place. That night, I slid Elaine's card into the folder under my bed, another piece of my growing escape plan. On her next visit, Elaine told me about Horizon Gardens, a cooperative community for seniors' independent homes, with shared gardens, activities, neighbors who looked out for one another. She showed me photos on her phone, cottages with flower beds, people playing chess, a community alive with laughter. It's not a facility, she said. It's a home, a place where you can live on your own terms. For the first time in years, I felt a tug of longing. She told me a unit had just opened up. South-facing windows, a small patio, exactly the kind of place I had once imagined aging into. I didn't answer right away, but I tucked the thought deep into my heart. Meanwhile, I kept visiting Raymond. He suggested placing the house into a trust. It ensures you stay in control, he explained. No one can force decisions on you. You can sell if you choose, or pass it to whomever you decide. Paige wouldn't even know unless you told her. He also warned me about the power of attorney form I'd discovered. If she ever got your signature on it, even by mistake, she could take control of everything: your finances, your care. We need to revoke any such authority and name someone you trust instead. My mind went immediately to Elaine. She would understand. She would respect my wishes. I agreed, and by the time I left his office that day, I had a plan: revoke the old power of attorney, create a trust, protect myself legally, and prepare for a future I chose. That evening, I called Elaine. "I'd like to see that unit," I said, "if it's still available." Her voice smiled through the phone. "I'll pick you up tomorrow at 10:00 a.m. The next morning, she drove me through the gates of Horizon Gardens. From the outside, it looked like modest apartments. Inside, it felt alive. A fountain bubbled in the courtyard, roses spilled over raised beds, and people greeted us by name. No one looked through me. No one sighed at my presence. The air smelled of real lavender, not candle wax. Elaine led me to Unit 8, a small cottage with wide windows and a patio opening onto a garden. It was empty, but full of possibility. I could already imagine where my reading chair would go, where the framed picture of Paige at 7 would sit, where my mother's quilt would rest. "This feels like somewhere I could breathe," I whispered. Elaine nodded. The cost was fair, affordable if I sold the house with plenty left to live securely. "The board would approve me easily," she said. Margot, a kind woman with bright blue glasses, handed me an application before I could protest. Just in case. I took it, feeling the weight of possibility in my hands. "Yes," I said. "Hold it for me." Back home, Paige brought me brochures for assisted living communities. She laid them on my lap with a practiced smile. "These are really nice. Some even have waiting lists, so the sooner we decide, the better." I nodded, not showing my cards. "I'll think about it." She beamed, convinced I was agreeing. That night, I added a new box under my bed labeled Simply Freedom. When the weekend came, Paige and her family left for a soccer tournament. They didn't invite me, didn't even ask what I would do alone in the house for 3 days. It was the perfect moment. By noon, Elaine, Margot, and a man named Harold helped me load 17 boxes, 2 suitcases, and my tomato pots into a van. I didn't take everything, only what mattered: my quilt, my books, James's tea service, the pink linen dress, and the shoebox of birthday cards. Before I left, I wrote a note on the counter. "The house has been placed in a trust. You have 6 months to decide whether to purchase it or move. Raymond Teague has all the details. I've moved to a place where I am welcome. Please don't call until you're ready to truly see me." Then I closed the door behind me without looking back. My new home at Horizon Gardens was smaller than the room I had just left behind, but it expanded around me like a deep breath. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a kitchenette opening into a living area, and most precious of all, a small patio where the morning sun fell in golden rectangles. Margot helped me arrange my reading chair by the window, James's old bookshelf against the wall, and the small table where we had eaten countless breakfasts together. Harold hung curtains and installed a bird feeder outside the kitchen window. Elaine unpacked my dishes, asking each time where I wanted something to go. Such a simple thing asking, but it brought tears to my eyes. By evening, the essentials were in place. We ate Chinese food on cushions on the floor, drinking green tea from paper cups. "To new beginnings," Elaine said. I tapped my cup against hers. "To being seen." When she left, I sat alone listening to the new silence, a dog barking in the distance, the hum of the refrigerator, laughter drifting from the common room. No footsteps overhead, no slammed doors, no sense of tiptoeing through someone else's space. Just me, free at last. The next morning, Harold knocked at my door with a potted mint plant. "Housewarming," he said gruffly. I invited him in for coffee. He told me about his wife, who had passed, about his years running the garden committee, about the weekly bingo nights. "Good people here," he said as he left. Later, I met Georgia pruning roses, Beverly practicing Tai Chi, Marcus walking his terrier Pepper. Each greeted me by name. No one looked past me. No one sighed at my presence. I was simply Loretta, the new neighbor. Meanwhile, across town, Paige returned home to find my note. I didn't see it, but I could imagine the shock, the disbelief, the anger. I knew she would call Raymond. And sure enough, he phoned me that evening. "Your daughter is upset. She's threatening legal action, saying you're not of sound mind." His tone was steady. "But you're fully documented as competent. The trust is airtight. She can't undo this. I exhaled slowly. Then don't give her my number or address. Not until she's ready to see me as a person. My phone buzzed all night with calls I ignored. Messages alternated between anger and pleading. How could you do this to us? You've put us in an impossible position. Please come home, Mom. We can work this out. By morning, their tone softened. We're worried about you. The kids miss you. I listened, but I didn't answer. For the first time in years, I set my own boundaries. A few days later, a text arrived from an unknown number. Grandma, it's Tyler. Mom doesn't know I'm texting. Where are you? Are you okay? My heart clenched. I wrote back. I'm fine, sweetheart. I moved to a place of my own. I'll explain when things calm down. He replied instantly. Mom is freaking out. Dad keeps calling lawyers. Was it because of what I told you? No, Tyler, I wrote. It was many things over a long time. None of it is your fault. Then after a pause, can I see you? I hesitated, but finally agreed. Yes, but give it a week or two. His last message came quickly. I miss you. 3 words that warmed me more than any apology Paige had ever offered. That weekend, I brought lemon bars to the potluck in the common room. People welcomed me to their table, asked about my life, listened as though I mattered. No one corrected me if I stumbled for a word. No one treated me like a fragile burden. I was simply Loretta again, the woman who made good lemon bars, the former night nurse with stories to tell. A week later, there was a knock at my door. Paige stood on my porch, arms folded face tight with anger. Mason lingered near the car, clearly reluctant. So, this is where you disappeared? Too? She said, stepping inside, her eyes sweeping over the cozy space as though looking for cracks to prove me wrong. I gestured to the sofa. This is where I moved. I left a note. She scoffed. After everything we've done for you, you vanish with a note. I stayed calm. I explained in the note. I needed to be somewhere I was welcome, not tolerated. She accused me of punishing them, of threatening to make them homeless. The house was always mine, Paige, I said evenly. I sold my condo to buy it. My name is still on the deed. She paled, but pushed back with more arguments. I listened, then said softly, This isn't about punishment. It's about reclaiming my dignity. Silence stretched between us. For once, she had no quick answer. Finally, she sat on the sofa, deflated. So you're just gone living here in this tiny place away from your family? I met her gaze. I'm not gone. I'm right here. My door is open to you, to the children, anytime you come with respect. Her eyes flickered uncertain. Then she stood, straightened her purse, and left without looking back. I sat in my chair by the window, sipping tea, listening to the soft chorus of evening crickets. The confrontation had been painful, but necessary. For the first time in years, I felt steady. Not triumphant, not vindictive, just steady. 2 days later, there was a softer knock at my door. 3 gentle taps, hesitant, almost apologetic. When I opened it, Tyler stood there, taller than I remembered, a backpack slung over one shoulder. Sneakers scuffed. His eyes stayed down as he said, I told Mom I had chess club. I just wanted to see if you're okay. Before I could answer, he wrapped his arms around me. Not the polite holiday hug, but something fierce and real. Inside, he looked around like he was taking in a dream. It smells like cookies, he said. I smiled. It could if we make some. His grin reminded me of the boy who used to climb into my lap. We stood elbow to elbow in the kitchen floor, dusting the counter eggshells, cracking too hard. He ate spoonfuls of dough and laughed, really laughed, the sound filling my little cottage. When the cookies baked, he sat at the table with a glass of milk and said quietly, You were always there, Grandma, at every game, every school thing. I didn't notice until now. I'm sorry. My throat tightened, but I smiled. It's all right, sweetheart. You're noticing now. 2 hours later, he stood at the door, slipping an extra cookie into his hoodie pocket. Can I come again next week? He asked. Anytime, I told him. But only if you want to. He nodded, eyes holding a quiet promise, then walked back down the path. I closed the door, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a ghost in someone else's home. I felt like someone worth visiting. The next day, Paige called. Tyler told me he came to see you, she said flatly. I braced for anger, but her voice was calmer than I expected. He said your place is nice, cozy. It suits me, I said. She paused, then added, he wants to come again. I won't stop him. Just let me know so I don't worry. It wasn't warmth, but it was a truce. A week later, Tyler arrived again, and this time he brought Zoe. She lingered in the doorway, arms crossed. It's small, she said, suspicion lacing her tone. Yes, I replied. But it's just right for one person. Tyler nudged her. Grandma makes cookies. Her resolve crumbled by the time she finished half of one. Soon she was showing me photos on her phone, talking about a book she was reading, asking if I could teach her to knit. Next time, I promised, I'll find my needles. As they left, Zoe hesitated. Mom said you left because you were mad at her? I knelt slightly to meet her eyes. I left because I needed my own space. Not because I was angry, but because I wanted to be happy. She studied me seriously. Are you happy? I looked around my little cottage at the tomatoes ripening on the patio, the lavender blooming by the door, the half-finished watercolor waiting on my easel. Yes, I said softly. I'm very happy. She nodded. Good. Mom's pancakes aren't as good as yours. A small confession, but it warmed me. Later that evening, Paige texted, the kids came home happy. Thank you for that, I replied. They're wonderful. You've raised them well. The typing dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally, she sent, they miss you. We all do. In our way. I let the words settle, tentative, but honest. My door is always open, I wrote back. No answer came, but that was all right. Healing takes time. At Horizon Gardens, my days filled gently. I joined a watercolor class, my first painting, a lavender stem in a chipped mug. They pinned it proudly on the wall. I attended health committee meetings with Georgia potlucks, with Harold and Beverly, and afternoon walks with Marcus and Pepper. For the first time in years, people asked questions and waited for my answers. No one sighed when I took a moment too long. 6 months passed quickly. My tomatoes yielded a modest harvest. My lavender attracted bees and butterflies, and Tyler and Zoe became regular visitors, sometimes with friends, sometimes just to sit and talk. Paige and Mason meanwhile decided to buy the house from the trust. Raymond handled the details. It was theirs now officially, though not on the terms they once imagined. One crisp autumn morning, Paige came alone. She stood on my porch holding a bakery box. Coffee cake, she said, her voice uncertain. From Muller's. Your favorite. I invited her in. We sat at my small table, the box between us, like a peace offering. She stared at her hands before speaking. I've been thinking. I didn't see you, Mom. I was so busy managing everything I stopped seeing the person in front of me. I'm sorry. The words were simple, but they landed like sunlight breaking through clouds. I reached for her hand. Thank you for saying that. It wasn't a full resolution. Some wounds were too deep for a single conversation. But it was a beginning, and beginnings are enough to keep hope alive. We sat at the table, drinking tea and eating coffee cake, talking about small things, the children, her work, my watercolor class. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was conversation, and conversation was more than we had shared in years. As she was leaving, she paused at the door. Will you come for Thanksgiving? The kids would love it. So would I. I smiled. I'd be honored. As a guest, not a helper. She hesitated, then nodded with a faint smile. As our guest of honor. That evening, I stepped out onto my patio. The lavender swayed gently in the autumn breeze, and butterflies danced in the fading light. 6 months earlier, I had left a house where I was tolerated. Now I had a home where I was welcome. Paige and I weren't healed, not completely, but we had begun to rebuild brick by brick on new terms. And the bridge that mattered most, the one to Tyler and Zoe, was already strong again, each visit another thread weaving us back together. That night, I opened the closet and drew out the pink linen dress still hanging in its garment bag. I slipped it on the fabric, cool and soft-fitting, differently now than when I bought it 5 years ago. My body had changed, but so had I. In the mirror, I didn't just see an old woman in a pretty dress. I saw someone who had reclaimed her dignity, who had refused to vanish quietly. Tomorrow evening, Horizon Gardens was hosting its monthly dinner dance. Harold had asked me to save him a waltz. Georgia promised to introduce me to her brother, a retired doctor with a passion for jazz. For the first time in years, I felt anticipation humming in my veins. Life wasn't over. Life was opening again. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat on my patio as the sun sank behind the crepe myrtles. Laughter floated from the common room, mingling with the wind and the hum of evening. All around me, lavender bloomed, filling the air with sweetness, not masking anything, not pretending to cover shame, but simply being itself. Just as I had finally learned to be. It had taken me decades to understand that love without respect is not enough, that sacrifice without boundaries can turn into erasure. I had given everything to my daughter, my family, my patience, and in the process, I had nearly forgotten myself. But dignity isn't something others grant us. It's something we must claim even when it costs us comfort, even when it frightens us to step into the unknown. As I sat there, the last of the sunlight slipping away, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. I thought about the question people always ask, what would you do if you were in my place? My answer now was simple. I would choose myself, because sometimes the bravest act of love is to show your children and yourself that you are still here, still alive, still worthy of being seen. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, if it made you think about your own family, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so more people can hear stories like this. And most of all, remember you are never too old or too diminished to reclaim your dignity.